So the next part is the medical side in connection with my son and in connection with the housing situation. So anyway, I was fine and I got home and they just basically said that the consultant said he would keep an eye on me and he would phone me, which I didn't really think was a thing. But anyway, I didn't know what was ahead then. And the consultant said that he would phone me regularly, daily, to make sure everything was okay. Unbeknown to me that they had discovered something that could potentially cause problems, but they didn't want to worry me in case it didn't develop into any problems, so they decided not to worry me unnecessarily, which I understand why, and they didn't want to hamper my recovery. So anyway, I got home and I was starting to, my recovery was fine, and I just had to take it easy, and my son didn't understand, so he was still going on about he wanted to get out of that place and back to our original home. And we had one support worker at this point that was coming out a couple of times a week and supporting at home and to try and take the weight off of myself and my partner. So anyway, my son was needing things, so I was having to go and take care of personal hygiene for him, even although I was trying to recover. And I seemed to be okay. I was a bit weak, but I seemed to be okay. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be able to recover from this and then deal with the housing situation. Well, anyway, one day I was eating small amounts of things because they told me to be careful in the beginning. So I did, and I didn't notice from the night before I didn't feel quite right. Next again day, by about afternoon, I was starting to get a lot of pain, and the painkillers weren't touching it, and I was screaming out by this point in pain. And so my partner had to phone an ambulance, and because of everything being going on in the medical health side of things with the world, it took quite a bit of time before they could get an ambulance out. Anyway, he had to phone the personal support worker to come out, and the personal support worker came out to the house while my partner was helping me. I was at this point screaming out. I don't remember doing that, but my partner said he could hear it downstairs when he was on the phone. Anyway, the ambulance came, and the ambulance were asking questions. They got my notes about when I was discharged after my cystectomy, and then they tried to give me pain relief, and I just remember projectiling everywhere. And the next minute, I got told, right, we need to take you in. They had to call a secondary ambulance because the medication they needed to give me, they don't keep all the strong medication in one ambulance in case there's any situations happen where people try and actually pinch off an ambulance. You know, they don't keep everything in one place. So anyway, this guy comes in, they get me downstairs to the ambulance, and then the two ladies that had originally come out said, right, they went in that other ambulance to do another job, and the guy that had switched over to give me the medication came in, and I got in the ambulance and he gave me that, and we went in the ambulance up to the Edinburgh Royal. Now, I don't remember everything. All I remember is being in A&E, giving me medication, them sticking this like shunt thing in my arm and giving me medication. And I must have been drifting in and out. I don't remember a lot about that. I just remember them telling me, we're going to take you up to a ward, which I was in a side thing, side room thing overnight. And then they took me through to the main part of the ward. Later on in the morning, people were checking me in that. Then I got taken through to the ward. Long story short is they did some checks on me, some scans. They couldn't figure out what was going on. I was grey at this point. I had a tube up my nose, a nasogastric tube up my nose. And it turned out that I had a blockage somewhere. So they did a bunch of tests, and then they told me, you're going into surgery this evening. If you wake up and your surroundings are the same, you're here. If you wake up and your surroundings are different, you're in a intensive care unit. So I was like, okay, that's all I remember. And I remember going down, being taken down in the lift to where the theatres were. And I remember the tree going under, and then I remember waking up in the ward where they told me that the surgery had been quite long. Anyway, the next day, I was out of it for a few days, so I can't remember what day this was. I spoke to the consultant, and he told me what happened, and he said that where they drained the fluid, because they couldn't get rid of all the excess tissue properly without damaging something, and they'd had a specialist consultant surgeon come in that deals with that kind of bowel things, and he'd helped the original consultants do the surgery that I was recovering from. They told me that the hole they made, they drained the fluid because they couldn't get rid of all the excess tissue. I think it was a metre of my bowel had got, it's wiggled its way into that little hole and got stuck and stopped everything basically. And I got told that by the time they got me into surgery and were able to deal with that and sort it out, that part of my bowel or intestine was grey. So had it been left, that part of my bowel would have died, and it would have caused problems. So anyway, the surgery part of it and the recovery was quite intense. I was in the Edinburgh Royal for about 2 weeks, I think it was 2-3 weeks, something like that. And I couldn't eat or drink the whole time. I was in there, I had a nasogastric tube in, and even with the nasogastric tube in, I kept constantly projectiling green bile, and that kept happening for weeks. Well, I'd say a week and a half. Then eventually it started to settle down. They couldn't hear bowel sounds, and eventually that started to come back. And then I got to the point where they had remedied the issue, they had fixed the problem, and the rest of the recovery I could do at home, which was regaining my strength and slowly getting back into eating and drinking, because I'd been on drips to that point. And I think it was only a few days before I got out that I'd started being able to eat and drink little things. I got back anyway. I spent a couple of days at my sister's house because it was decided all around the board that it would be better if I was able to recover without having to worry about how my son was still dealing with the housing issue, because I was so weak. So anyway, I went to my sister's for a couple of days, and then my sister worked, and I realised very quickly it wasn't going to work being up there, because I needed help in and out, the loo to get washed and stuff, and she wasn't able to be there because she worked. So my partner came and picked me up, and we had a wheelchair, and went back to the house, and my son was again still not coping with the fact that the house and issue was still as it was, and he wanted to go back to the old place, and it got to the point where I was very, very poorly. I thought I was going to end up back in the hospital. I was not being able to keep much in or down, food and drink related wise, and it got quite dangerous to the point that it was deemed that it would be better for them to try and we agreed it was better to try and get support coming in on a more full-time basis. We tried by my partner taking me out in the car in the wheelchair, trying to get me out a lot of the time of the day to get fresh air, and so that my son was spending more time with the support workers, if you like, to try and let me recover. Because I wasn't being able to rest or sleep because he was stressing out too much. So we got to the point where the support were going to try and get coming in full time. So what we got told was, in order for the support to be deemed necessary full time, my partner and I would have to make ourselves unintentionally homeless, based on the fact that trying to do this and trying to get it to the point as well where my son would be deemed as needing his own property as well, because this landlord now had an eviction on us at that property, had to be how that worked in order for those two things to come together and work in my son's best interest. So we had to make ourselves unintentionally homeless. So where I talked about hotels, then the guest house, then the homelessness unit, was the route we had to take to safeguard my son, which is a bit crazy, but that's how it had to be.